Hello, everyone.
Hey, Aaron.
Hi, Mark. How's everyone doing today?
It's going quiet, but good.
It's nice and rainy here in Pittsburgh.
I guess so. I haven't looked out the window yet.
I can hear it. I can hear it tapping on my basement window next to me. Uh, so as usual, we'll get started as we in about 5 minutes as we get people joining. And today we have discussion about our release process and our schedule in the next couple releases. So that will be very timely. So just hang on a few minutes and we'll get started. Hey, Norm.
Hello.
Again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started about 3 minutes at 12:35 Eastern Time. Sorry about that.
How are the members of our community on this lovely gray Friday?
Well, hanging in there, Hal. Norm. Sorry.
Hal, Norman, whatever. Mark, I can give you a long list of things that I've been called that are less polite than either of those.
It's the beard.
That actually happens all the time.
Do people call you things less polite than Hal?
That happens even more.
Yeah.
But
I
then I
think it's
get
because
called
sometimes we have like a lot of Normans and a lot of on the screen, depending on, and so it
True.
confuses everybody.
That does happen. You're right.
Does happen. I love when I come into a meeting and there's like 5 norms. It's fun.
The only thing better than one Norm. Yeah, a couple more minutes. Looks like it'll be a full house today. Sebastian, I love your response. Fantastic. It's a great way to answer that question.
Can't complain. It's Friday. We have meetings, so we're not even tempted to go outside where it's raining. It's
Nice.
it's almost a break, so we can pretend that we're gonna, not work.
Love it. Love it. So it looks like we still have people coming in. Another minute. Okay, well, we're at 12:35, so I say let's get started. Special guest today, Norm, gonna give us a great presentation. So let me make sure that sharing is on. And yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to the Torus community meeting today. And I will turn it over to Norm.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks to everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be starting to talk you through the current approach to how we plan for releases for Torus and what our current product roadmap is. I think that having a presentation of this to the larger community is overdue. Part of the reason that it's taken a little bit of time is that we've, as always, we are always working at about 110%, rushing to keep up. And it's good to be reminded that telling everyone about the great work is equally as important as doing the work. If we're not talking about it, you're not hearing about it. So what I'm hoping that you will get out of this presentation, first, I'm going to be talking about a more formal release process and more formal release scheduling. And I want you to understand why we're moving to this more formal schedule. When we think about our release schedule, we have some things that we're doing in the short term to try to make some accommodations, some things we're doing longer term that we hope will be a little more consistent, talk about what those are. Then dive into the 2023 roadmaps. You can understand when releases are coming in this current calendar year, what's on deck for our next 2 releases, I see those features, and get a glimpse of the things that we're thinking about for the remaining 2023 releases. Finally, I'm hoping we can have a conversation about how we get this information out to you. Much as it would be lovely to continue to have a presentation every Friday talking to you about the cool stuff that's happening and that's coming in Torus, probably need some more effective mechanisms for communicating on this. And so, that leads us to this question of just be warned, we are still working through some consistent approaches for the community engagement. And we're trying to put in place some crisper, both processes and tools to help with soliciting strategic and tactical input about Torus from our community. Getting more formal there as we grow is going to be important. Pulling in those requests and processing them for features, for enhancements, for improvements, and making sure that everyone knows who they should be talking to, and publishing the roadmap in a way that is easily and regularly accessible, but also understandable, not having it hid away under a couple layers of GitHub, or worse, needing to wait until I show up on a Friday to say, hey, let's take a look at my PowerPoint. So key takeaway, as always, this is a work in progress, work that we're all doing together, and hopefully this is going to be exciting to you. So, when I dive in here, the first thing we want to talk about is the fact that what we're moving towards is a system with much more structure and much more formality than we've engaged with Torus up until now. Why do we need this? Because really, since Torus has launched over the past 24 months, we've really been able to maintain an awful lot of flexibility, and that gave us lots of options. We can decide when we're going to push things out. We can decide to make changes, but that kind of flexibility, it turns out, is like, oh, this is really great. We want to be as flexible as possible. Ended up really being a little bit ephemeral and disappearing on us. It turns out that flexibility isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And what we found as we've tried to engage flexibly is a lot of reasons for increased structure and increased formality. One of the first, Torus is intended to be a larger open source community-based effort. Torus is the OLI platforms, the future of OLI. But when we talk about OLI in this case, we're not talking narrowly about OLI as it lives at CMU. We're talking about this larger community-based research effort that we're all a part of. Torus right now is already in production at 3 different sites. We have an ASU production server, a KTH production server here at CMU. And beyond those folks who are using our production server, there are now 8 different contributing organizations to Torus. We have a combination of universities and for-profit companies making contributions. And it turns out that that larger community needs to have a crisper sense of when we're going to make changes, when they can expect things rolling out the door, and how they're going to contribute beyond simply saying, well, when does Norm think we should do it? Norm says so. It turns out it's not a very effective mechanism for scaling. And so our larger community needs this increased structure. We've also been really fortunate in the past 2 years and in the coming years to have an awful lot of funded projects and an awful lot of folks who are excited to be using and contributing to Torus. Those different projects and the resources that are funding them are creating some competing demands. We don't want to end up in a place where it's simply the first person to make a request gets that request completed. And so we need some way to get better visibility into the different demands that our projects have and what kind of funding and resource we have to deliver those pieces. We don't just want the loudest voices. We need some way to try to prioritize things thoughtfully. We also need to recognize a real need for robust releases. We've been fortunate in our early years to have our leading adopter, our early adopter faculty taking advantage of Torus in ways that, allowed them to maybe be a little more forgiving of hiccups and challenges they might run into. Now that we are hitting scale, we absolutely must be releasing strong, robust products that are going to be seamless for our faculty and, more importantly, for our learners. I think we all know from years of experience that nothing will burn bridges faster than having these kinds of courseware products break. And so process and formality are going to get us the kind of robustness that we need. Aligned with that, we also need to recognize the reality that most of our user base currently is moving off of a large use in fall, a large use in spring. And if we can be thoughtful in aligning our releases to that calendar, we're going to be better serving the needs of the broadest parts of our community. And we wanted to think about how we can do that in a way that doesn't limit us to just 2 releases a year. Finally, you all as a community need to know when things are coming, right? Really having a clearer vision of when features are expected to be developed, when you can expect them to be tested and released, is going to give all of you the ability to engage a little more predictably with our work and allow you to plan. So all of this, then, we start to wrap these pieces together, is going to really make sure that we as a development team and we as a larger community can be accountable for the commitments that we're making. So how are we going to get there? Well, what we moved towards, decided upon towards the end of the year and started to put in action this year is an annual release cycle where we want to start off by establishing and publishing a larger strategy for the year, not an 18-page document, though any of you that have been subjected to my writing know that I tend to go on at length, but something crisp to define what are the big picture things we want to accomplish in this year. And then we're going to start to manage that strategy and achieve it through a series of 4 releases. We're going to be having 2 larger, what we refer to as semester releases that are intended to line up and be used for spring and fall. And then 2 midterm releases that we imagine some of our users will not deploy, right? So we don't want to make folks wait 6 months for changes, but we recognize that not everyone wants to be deploying in the middle of a semester. With those releases, we want to be really crisp and predictable. When are our release dates? When are we engaging in a code freeze? And how are we going about testing? When we think about our product roadmap, of those 4 releases, we want you to be able to look out at the next 2 releases to have a pretty crisp sense of what features are in development or planned for the 6 months. For the 6 months beyond that, we have 2 more releases that are going to be less in focus. You say, yeah, these are the kind of things we're hoping to accomplish, but as we get closer to the release dates, we'll be able to firm up and cement our plans. So this ends up meaning that our semester releases are likely to be having larger changes. We can afford to have greater impact on students and educators. Recognizing the rollout at the start of spring, at the start of fall, we also recognize that they are higher stakes releases. And so we plan for a slightly larger testing period. When we make our midterm releases, there's a sense that these may well be optional and that we want to be attentive to the fact that the majority of our classes will be in progress during these points. And we want to be attentive to any impact that pushing this release might have on these live classes. We know that some of our users won't grab these optional releases. They may only choose to push the semester releases. And we have a slightly shorter testing window. So we're looking at a 2-week testing cycle for our midterms, 3-week testing cycle for our semester releases. At the bottom, you can see my fine skills with clip art and our annual release timeline. At the end of the year, we want to look ahead and establish a strategy. And this is a place where we want to really invite larger community comment and engagement. As we move into our midterm development cycle, about midway through, we want to start to look ahead to planning for the next release. We get 2 weeks out from the end of March, and we want to hit a code freeze, test for 2 weeks, release, and then move on to developing our semester release. You can see we continue with this process over the year. So this is our ideal state, and we're eventually going to get to a point where we can say very specifically on the 3rd Thursday of every March, we will have a code freeze, and 2 weeks later, we will have a release. We're not quite there yet for 2023. We're still feeling our way into this space, and we're trying to make sure that as we try to hit our strategic goals, we're making the best use of the time we have available. So our current release plan, when we look at our 2023 strategy, we've got 3 big things guiding our work. One is really trying to prioritize features that we're going to need for our Gates courseware project. Luckily, the vast majority of these features are things that will end up making Torus more broadly usable, more broadly appealing. We've tried to develop these features and line them up in ways that in many cases, they're addressing longstanding requests, longstanding needs of the legacy platform. We also know that if folks are going to migrate from legacy onto the Torus platform, we need to have feature parity. Your instructors need to have access to similar types of gradebooks and dashboards and assessment options. And so we're working to get parity, and in some cases better than parity, additional capabilities compared to the legacy system. Finally, migration of courses. A few of you were in the meeting back at the end of 2019, early 2020, where we first talked about launching Torus. And I made you a promise at that point, no orphans. We were going to have no orphan courses. We are well on the way to being able to meet that promise. And so course migrations are really in full swing. We have been doing test ingestions and have a series of faculty and subject matter expert teams reviewing the results of that. With each time that we do an ingestion, we're getting things a little cleaner. So that's our big picture for 2023. When we look at how this plays out in specific schedules for our releases 0.23 through 0.26, our midterm release is coming up. We're about 2 weeks out from our code freeze, and we're going to be making that release available on March 30th. When we look at our fall semester, we're going to be doing a code freeze at the end of June, taking 3 weeks and releasing on July 20th. That's going to make that available for us both in LearnLab Summer School, but also well enough in advance of faculty beginning to use materials that they can test this out, try any new capabilities before we get into the mid-August launch schedule. We have not nailed down specific days for our midterm and spring semester releases, but we know that it's going to be at the start of October for the midterm, likely at the end of December for spring semester, but hopefully with enough time that we can be confident before we disappear for winter break. So that's our larger release plan. And again, you'll note that this is not the ideal strategy. Eventually we're going to be a little crisper on what those dates look like. What's our roadmap, though? What are we actually developing across these different releases? Well, for the end of the month for our midterm release, an awful lot of our work around the Gates project has been in building out better entry points for students and for faculty into the courses, moving beyond what we think of as the syllabus model, and instead providing a syllabus where we can guide students to content, better call out areas where they're struggling, better call out areas where scheduling is going to encourage them to work on certain types of things. That in turn leads to this notion of soft scheduling, which Aaron's going to be demoing. Pretty excited about this feature. We have always had hard deadlines inside of OLI. You need to complete this quiz by time X, or you have this module which needs to be done between these two dates. Soft scheduling is setting some dates where you should expect to be working on a module. We know that if we've got a class meeting coming up next Monday and that we're working on a module in stoichiometry, I should be able to encourage students on that, even if there aren't hard deadlines there. Soft scheduling is going to make it easier for our faculty to do that work. We have this notion of an exploration activity inside of the new courseware, but really this is one instantiation of what's always been a key element of OLI's success: larger, more synthetic activities that move beyond some of our basic embedded activities. Designating these as explorations is going to allow us to try to call them out a little more and not just have them show up at one place in the course. We've been developing what we're calling collaborative spaces. This is the underlying technology that supports discussion forums and chat as learning activities, and will also support what we're calling social annotation work that's emerging from our Gates work, putting in the pieces we need to drive larger analytics. And finally, we are finally going to be able to turn on CMU payment capabilities with our new release. And I'm super excited about being able to release true A/B testing capabilities. We are integrating with the Upgrade platform to manage A/B testing. That in turn is going to connect out to more thoughtful adaptive experimentation capabilities. That's happening this month. When we look ahead to what's coming out in July, we've got a lot of stuff on deck. Any of you that have taken a look at the adaptive authoring tools may have been struck by their complexity. We've got some new tools that are going to make authoring some adaptive pages simpler, better opportunities for diving into details about courses, for details about students, expanding some of the things that we can do with the scheduling capabilities that'll be rolling out, and finishing our key pieces of analytics infrastructure. We've got a new kind of activity that will allow us to connect to LTI activities, so easily integrating with activities outside the system. Those of you at CMU have heard about the Emerald Cloud Lab. We've got some new Cloud Lab activities to support their use of Torus for training, better creation and onboarding materials, a little more attention to support, which I know that our support team will be excited to see and hear, and a few pieces required for Gates, better instructor alerts, being able to require surveys as students enter the course, and some better access to assignments. Looking to the second half of the year, we do not have our features locked in. Some of the things that we're hoping to look at and consider, we know that you've been asking for certificates. We're going to get there, I promise. We've also been asked for years about better homework system capabilities. We're exploring what we might be able to do in the short and long term there. Expanding our dashboards and analytic capabilities, providing access to adaptive experiments and not just A/B experiment capabilities, improving our user experience, thinking about performance. And we also have an emerging need for being able to evaluate embedded questions, not just across one dimension, but being able to evaluate across multiple dimensions. We're still working out what that looks like and what it means, but this is what the second half of the year looks like. So, some questions that I anticipate from you. First, where can I learn more about this stuff, Norman? I can't remember all the things you just rattled through. We are working to update the current Torus webpage to try to expand it, provide better opportunities for Torus tracking. So we'll be sending out an email on that, but we'll also be doing more regular updates at these community meetings. I know that how we solicit and capture and track features and requests isn't always clear, especially to our broader audience. We know that we need to do better at this. We're exploring how to better get that information out there. Right now, features that are in the pipe are being captured via GitHub, some additional pieces that are in our Jira board. Those are accessible to you, although they are not very user-friendly. We've got to figure out how to do a better job of it. And we're also going to continue to refine how we go out and solicit your input. Right now, obviously, these meetings make for a great venue. I know that Erin has been doing great work in talking with you and the larger community to try to capture and streamline processes, continue to have those conversations, and try to be a little more formal as we ask for input. Some questions for you, things that I'm interested in. Should we be doing an academic or a calendar year cycle? I introduced this as the 2023 cycle, but one could imagine moving to an academic cycle instead. When I talk about a spring release and a fall release, I was trying to describe this to someone else who was like, wait, are you developing in the spring? Are you releasing in the spring? And I said, actually, neither of those things. We're releasing for the spring semester, which other people would refer to as beginning in the winter. So do the naming conventions that I just rattled out make sense? I just talked through a lot of new features. Love to hear which ones you'd like to see some demos of and details on over the next couple of meetings. And finally, just generally, what are your thoughts? What feedback do you have on this release cycle? So that's the big picture. Would love to have some time for discussion. I don't know how much time I just chewed up, but thank you for listening. And sorry that it was such a one-directional, me talking at you. Questions, comments, anything look especially exciting or terrifying there? See one vote for an academic cycle rather than a calendar cycle.
Yes.
2 votes.
No, that me twice.
No. The chats, you're getting support in the chat, Don.
From me.
Yes.
Is there someone else?
Yeah,
Yes,
there's
April
others.
and Natalie have
Okay.
signed on. You're getting co-signers here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
on board with the academic one too.
Yeah, because we're always trying to put out our new version like right at the beginning of the semester so that people can use it. Maybe even a little ahead of the semester, like 2 weeks, because our instructors often want to let their students, wander around the course for a bit before they decide whether to take it or not, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I think that we sort of started off on a calendar year just because we got started and with a release in December, but revisiting and essentially launching our strategy on the academic year cycle, is a thing that we can do in July. So.
Okay, cool.
How do you feel about the release cycle generally? Is this anything in there that concerns you? I know that this does mean we were not going to be able to turn on a dime and push out new stuff overnight. We obviously will still be pushing out hot fixes to release problems and address defects, but you are trading flexibility for some predictability, and I hope that you find that appealing.
As long as things like for the lab, if we need to make an update for a bug fix, if that's possible, then if the system that launches stuff is fixed for a semester, I'm good. As long as we can fix our own things, like update content, update activities.
Yes, and this is this is one of the big selling points for Torus, that we've really updated the publishing capabilities to make it easier to push those updates and to put greater control of that in your hands and not require as many or in fact any go around with our sysadmin team. So
in other words, we get to stop pestering Raphael and Jean.
that's the hope, or at least if you need to continue pestering them, you'll
They
be
might get to
pestering
eat
them for
lunch and
new
go to the
things.
bathroom once in a while.
Yeah. Aaron, I wonder if rather than having a discussion on what features are most interesting, would it make sense for us to mail out a poll, let people or a survey, do some quick votes on features they want to learn more about? And we can use that to inform future meeting topics.
Well, I was actually just going to ask you to go back to what's going to be in the next release and show that off and ask folks which of those things they'd probably want to see in upcoming meetings.
Sure, I can do that. Give me 1 second.
And I think that's all we need. This group's really communicative and we stay in touch pretty frequently. So I don't know if you guys want a poll. I'm happy to send one out, but I think I have a pretty good understanding of the things you're waiting for. But anything here that you'd like to ask about specifically and maybe see in the future in the next coming meetings. And Sebastian, you have your hand up. Do you have a question, comment?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
right as I was about to call, the phone rang, and I was trying to make it stop. Before I unmute it again. A couple of things. One is, thank you for going back to these things, because what I was going to ask was obviously there's a lot, even though we've been following the development of Torus, when it all happens, at these sort of I guess status report points, and it all comes at once, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot to handle. And so I was going to ask you to to circulate those slides at least, so that we can get a sense of what these tools are and the timelines and so on and so forth, where we can have a little bit, maybe not only a more cogent view, but also more cogent feedback in terms of how the timelines interface with our own workflow. And also in what order it would make sense to get more familiarized with those tools. So I guess that's done. And then and then the other question I asked was, how do you see this? I don't know how, my view of OLI, of course, is heavily mediated by my own involvement in it, and my own department's involvement in it, and how things have been done in the past and are being done now that we've added Natalie and etc. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to how you envision maybe a redistribution of tasks in terms of workflow. I know in the past we had the authors, and then we would work with Mark to facilitate the some of the technology aspect, and then it would go to you, and then it would come back to us, and then so it seems like we're sort of rearranging the furniture here a little bit, and if the question makes sense at all.
I think what
And
you're
I don't know
asking.
if other departments were like this too. Like, I mean, we've been fortunate enough to have competent authors, and now that Natalie is here, she certainly does a lot of the work herself, both on the content development and on the the authoring tools. Mark has been heavily involved in troubleshooting the tech aspect and QA and all that stuff, and so I'm just wondering how that's going to evolve, if how much of our assistance you need, or what. Does that make sense?
Yes. So what you're asking is how does your workflow change with Torus, right? Your authoring and publishing and delivering workflows. And it's a great question. And I think they'll change somewhat, definitely. But I think what will happen is there'll be a shift to being able to do some new and better things, right? So publishing in Torus is really easy and push button, and you do it yourself, and you can do it at any time, and change typos, change activities, whatever you need to do, and push those out to sections that are running. And then the instructors of those sections have the option to either deploy those new publication things, those new fixes or new content or whatever, immediately, or they can wait until, depending on how their semester is going. How that changes the workflow is authoring is still done. Natalie, we still have an authoring tool, and Natalie's been doing a great job, I think, of wrangling that workflow and understanding, getting the right people trained on Torus. In fact, I have a training that we're scheduling for mid-March, beginning of April, for some folks to get in there and start using Torus from the languages department. And then since I don't know how much technology handling there would need to be, like in terms of what Mark does now, but what that can change to is, being that this is open source, and being that there's going to be a lot of new things that we're going to want to add to Torus, I can imagine it's just going to get more exciting, because we're going to be able to do more integrations, create new things, new activities, all of those things that you probably haven't been able to do very easily in the past. And so I'm excited about the directions that we can go with this platform and with the content. And so, yeah, Norm, did you want to add some stuff there?
That sounds great.
One way to think about it is, how would you adapt your workflow to take better advantage of newly freed up time from experts? I think that when we think about the traditional OLI workflow, we have brilliant learning engineers working with amazing educators to help to design learning experiences. And then they spend a lot of time translating that into very picky XML documents and start pushing files around on a server that they push out into the world. And that then we've got really thoughtful technologists who have to troubleshoot whether the XML is missing a bracket. What we're hoping is that Torus takes a lot of those ridiculous tasks that we're wasting expert time on and instead can get them back to being more thoughtful and careful and innovative in how we build out these learning experiences, more thoughtful in how we analyze and look ahead to the next things. And so, you know, in as much as your learning engineers and course developers shouldn't now be mucking about with XML, how can you make better use of their time? And, you know, and the notion that Mark doesn't need to go in and figure out who missed a bracket. How can he be spending his time to help to create a more robust learning experience?
Yes, indeed. I like it.
So excellent, good, because we've invested heavily in this vision.
Yes,
You
that's
told
right.
me you
I don't like
hated
to
it.
go
I
back
would
to
be
the drawing
worried.
board. Let's start from ground one.
All right, we will share out these slides and you know, we're committed to taking this information, getting it up on the web and keeping it updated. Just not quite there yet today.
I think you took the slide away too fast, but was there anything there that looked interesting to folks or that you wanted to know more about? And we had some folks join late as well, so maybe I can get these and show them up. I don't know, Norm, if you're planning on staying or.
Well, you know me, if nobody has an opinion, I always have a couple, but
Yeah,
anything
please.
that deals with collaboration and multimodality, so anything with AV, you know, how we can, is always something that is of interest to us because we are, looking to, especially since, you know, Natalie has arrived, we've taken a new look at you know, but designing our courses differently for certain in the French 3, but also in the earlier level is to implement more sort of multi-literacies based approaches, which of course do involve being able to not only have students play with a variety of inputs, but also potentially have them design and upload a varieties of outputs and productions, right? So anything from sound, video, images, infographics, et cetera. So anything that we can look at that you know, showcases these kinds of tools in terms of learning activities, and what kind of documents we can put in there, what the students can do with them, and what kind of documents they can produce, then I'm all for that. Play with video, annotate, I don't know, stuff.
And yes, to Natalie's point, yeah, there is file upload in Torus right now. So there is the ability for students to upload files of different types, and you can grade them as an instructor. And that grade will populate a grade book.
Can they annotate videos, for example? Or
We can't annotate videos yet, but we're working on some annotation tools and testing some things out to see what would work and what would make sense. And then we have the collaboration spaces that have already been pushed out.
Really cool.
Yeah. And so you can assign a collaboration space on a page and have discussions on specific content. So there's a lot in place. You know, we've heard you all as you've been as I've been collecting these preferences over the few year or so that we've been developing and incorporating them in for sure. What's most exciting to you guys? What's most exciting? Share that excitement. Excited about new workflows? You excited about new features? Are you excited about it being open source and the possibilities of development opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think increasingly, you know, I keep on now. I open every single class for the past 2 years. I've opened with trying to ingrain in students that learning is a team sport, and that if they do it alone, they're doing it wrong.
Mhm.
Despite all the statements on academic integrity, I'm like, yeah, you need if you do it alone, you're really doing it wrong, or not as well as you could be. But increasingly also developing is going to be a team sport, right?
Mhm.
And so having the ability to work on a platform where you don't have to worry who is on, who's doing what, and everybody can just play at the same time potentially is particularly exciting. So
That's great.
I think, yeah, I think that anything to make it more open, collaborative, and seamless is good in my book.
Great to hear. Thanks.
Again, a very selfish view of things.
That's fine. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear everybody's selfish view of things.
Did we have, I think we had a demo of the soft scheduling scheduled for this meeting? Too many schedules in one sentence there.
I actually thought this conversation would take the hour, so I I didn't prepare the demo. I apologize. I know if you guys came for the demo, I'll schedule another meeting.
I have a quick question. This is off topic, but I was just wondering if this is something that would be covered in an upcoming meeting.
Okay, great.
I've been doing a lot of reading on a particular grant that we're working on, and it's surprising. I'm seeing a lot about diagramming in STEM, which is not the focus of our current grant, but I've been doing a lot of exciting reading about it. And I'm wondering a little bit about, I know that there's major issues with accessibility surrounding activities that are so visually based. I know that that's an inherent problem, but there is a lot of exciting research going on with the utility of student diagramming for understanding model building and scientific understanding. And I'm wondering about the capabilities for building visual diagramming, students building that within Torus, including something as simple as filling out tables and how that will work. So that's my question, tables and other diagramming capabilities.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So one great question, and I think I would put all of this work into a slightly different context, right? A reminder that when our work has been at its best, when we've been doing the most interesting and most effective work, it's when we start to cross departmental and domain boundaries and bring in colleagues from other areas. And so trying to more narrowly address these challenges of how do we build effective, engaging, graphics intense learning experiences that are nonetheless accessible feels like its own research project that we should be bringing in some HCII colleagues on. I think that in the medium term, I think right now we should be able to create and have students populate tables in Torus. Is that accurate, Aaron, or am I I know that we've got those capabilities in Echo. We will eventually have them, but creating a table-based activity where each field in the table is a text box is something that we can do now in the current system, and I think we'll be already able to do in Torus.
I believe so, yes. And we have a little more robust tables in Torus as well, so you can actually do a little more formatting than you have been able to in the past.
One of the things that we're working on, so when we talk about the larger Torus community, one of the contributors to the community are our colleagues at Arizona State University in the ETX Education through Exploration Lab. They've been our partners on the SCATES grant. Through an earlier Department of Ed project, they have built out some activities that are intended to be more generic things, a style of activity like a diagrammer tool and like a writing tool that can be plugged into other courses. They're working right now to plug these activities in and make them available in Torus. And so I think in the short term, we will have some better diagramming tools available over the next 6 to 8 months. And it may make sense for us to arrange for a visit from our friends to give a demonstration of what those tools currently can do and where they're headed. I can almost guarantee that it will do only a part of what you hope to do and what the research is inspiring you to do. But that, again, is a good jumping off point. Let's see what the next step of capabilities are, and then start thinking about what do we want to do beyond that. I'll confess that we have been pretty heads down in trying to just make sure that Torus can do what we can already do in Legacy and take care of this Gates grant. And I am desperate to get to the place where we can take a breath and start daydreaming and being creative and figuring out like what's the next new stuff. But showing off some of the steps along that path might inspire you and start to give you a sense of where you want to take this larger work.
Thank you so much for addressing that, both of you. I appreciate it.
Something else that I actually put in that I had scheduled for this meeting was to start to talk about what we think of as a homework system and start to develop or start to get an idea of what kinds of things you all would want if we were developing something like that. So the first question is what do you think of when you think of homework system that might be different from what we can do in OLI now?
Yeah, I have something for that. So something that a lot of educators that are using our materials across the US and Canada for language, they'll complain to me that, you can assign a due date for the test, but you can't assign a due date for any of the formative activities that the students are using throughout. And they want to be able to do that because that's what they're doing in competing large textbook publisher platforms that have ebooks and eSAMs and basically online workbooks. So being able to partition out instead of just telling students this page is due this date and I'm going to take a look at it, then being able to actually have those dates on the student facing side is something that I think would be attractive to a lot of users.
Natalie, do you imagine that you would be applying one date to many things simultaneously? Because I think a lot of platforms don't have as many inline activities as we do, and they're not as disparate. They're not physical. They're not separated from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine that would be very tedious to apply dates to every activity in an OLI course.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't know if y'all have seen platforms that are like SuperSite from Vista Higher Learning. You're able to assign kind of a whole section at once, like all the vocabulary activities or part of the vocabulary activities to check off. These are the date that you want students to do these formative assignments, or whether they're formative or summative or instructor graded or auto graded. Being able to check those all off at once, so that with language classes, we often like our students to engage multiple times a week with the course rather than having one single due date, so that they're learning in smaller increments and they'll be retaining language better that way. And so being able to assign multiple due dates within a module instead of just saying everything's due this Friday at midnight is something that seems attractive to folks.
Interesting. I'd be interested to see how soft scheduling meets and doesn't meet that requirement. I think part of what has been guiding our thinking around homework systems has been some really aggressive feedback from some colleagues in the STEM domains who say, look, like when I'm teaching chemistry or I'm teaching calculus, I need to be able to assign problem sets for people to practice. It's not the same as having your low stakes activities. I have to be able to give a score, and I'd like to be able to have which problems are assigned be a little more flexible, whether that's being suggested by the system based on learning estimates, or whether faculty members really going in and making some selections. And so this is on our longer term roadmap as part of the Gates grant. And we think that might start to hit some of the things that you've just described, but not all of them. I think that sort of notion of cycling through, I think we want to think through how that plays out. And I think that once you start to see what some of the specs are there, you can start to think about how would I want to deploy this in the language courses, and how does it how does it not meet my needs?
Do any of those things resonate with others? And do others think? Okay, Dawn, having ability for instructors to inject their own problems into assignments. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, like, or to pick which 10 out of a set of 20 they want to give to their students or something like that. It's something we've been thinking maybe we could do it ourselves in the lab, but if there was a more general solution, that would be fantastic too.
Great.
Would those questions need to be pre-existing so that they are skill tagged?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean,
We haven't done the
just
skill tagging stuff yet because that's a very complicated question in the lab that we've never had time to address. But we've had both ideas, both authoring by instructors of their own problems on the fly, and having our own pools or banks of questions that were pre-made, pre-tested and all that stuff for instructors to choose from. Or possibly even to be able to like randomize what students get, so that for our problems we can have it like exactly the same problem, but you change out what letters are used so it looks different, and that might help address inappropriate collaboration on assignments. Answer sharing, like, because then students would have to think, is this actually the same thing? And that's teaching them something. So they'd still be able to cheat from other people's answers, but at least they'd have to think about it in the process. So
yeah,
That's interesting. That last use case, I think, could be addressed by the feature in the platform. It's an author-facing feature of dynamic questions. So I can author a question that essentially contains, in the question stem, in the feedback and the correct choices, variables that at runtime can be evaluated and supplied by the system. So the idea is I can construct a single question that might ultimately show up to the student in 100 different forms. So that's kind of giving additional practice, but also addressing that need, I think, that you were pointing out.
yeah, that sounds cool. If something like that were available for the lab, that would be really awesome. Like if we could specify like a matrix or something of problems, like here's the simple stuff. Once they get those, without having to undo and redo and reset a lot of times, once they're showing mastery on the simple problems, progress to intermediate, and once they get those, progress to, but just by fetching them out in, like, I don't know how to do that, but I want to be able to do that. So, and adding the layer of the lab that's like not an OLI system, it just plays nicely with it most of the time. Yeah, so something that any kind of activity could fetch stuff. Does that make any sense?
I think we need to explore. So I think we should do two things. One is, maybe set up some time to show you what the current dynamic question capabilities are.
Because I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be leaning pretty heavily on that to make any notion of a homework system viable, right? We need to be able to take one question and let it generate lots and lots of different questions, just to give students additional opportunities for learning and for practice. How and that might engage with the lab or with other super activities is I think a bigger question, but certainly one we should talk about.
And Dawn, we have that meeting set up in a couple
Yes.
weeks where I'll make sure I demo that specifically for you.
That would be great. Good. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Aaron, I will confess, I'm super excited about soft scheduling, and I wonder if we could let Darren show it off, just because I've been talking it up. So if Darren feels like he's in a spot where he could show it off, that might be cool.
That'd be great.
Great. That would be awesome. I just wanted to put out the question that I would like to learn more about the problem solving as well. because I'm interested in having worked examples be a problem type, not just solving for the problems, especially because so much learning happens with worked examples. So I would just put that out there as something I'm interested
Great. And you're not the only one. So yeah, let's talk more about that and see how that might work. I would definitely love to talk to you more about that, Lauren. So I'll reach out.
So I can give a very brief demo of this scheduling feature with the caveat that this is completely unrehearsed. So I have no idea which direction this will actually go. So let me share my screen here. This is also being done on our development server, which could just go away at any moment. As soon as we land code, the system automatically redeploys, but I think we should be safe. So as an instructor, right, I see this as the kind of the manage the course section overview. There's now a new option that used to say gating and scheduling is now rebranded advanced gating and scheduling, and there's a new scheduling option. So I can go into that interface, and this course section has a specific start and end date associated with it. So I see on the top portion here, that first row, the columns of this table represent the individual weeks that are present in over the duration of the course, given the start and the end date. So for this particular course section, there are maybe a dozen or so top level units. And I can click reset timeline to actually have the system lay out a soft schedule for all of the course material. And it's giving me the opportunity to select which dates I want to opt into scheduling against. And I might want to align that with actually perhaps the days that I'm actually meeting in class, right? So say it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so clicking OK lays out those units across that timeline. I can drill down then into one particular unit to see the modules below there. So now I see, right, composition of substances and solutions has these various submodules that are laid out accordingly underneath that unit. Now, this is what the system laid out for me by default, right, according to its kind of scheduling algorithm. But I can change that, right? If I want to change the order of two units, because that's just how I teach it, right, I can just simply grab that and slide it over to the right, and grab one and slide it over to the left. Right, and it moves everything kind of beneath it automatically. But you see, when I did that, it put a little lock icon next to those two items that I manually adjusted. Right, so now they're kind of fixed in place until I would undo that. So if I undid that one, and now, well, it's not a really great demo at the top level, but if I move that back and say I move this one here, that now has the lock icon, and that's in place. I can continue to move the parent container, the unit, and reposition it. But since I manually adjusted that one module, that stays fixed in place until I would unclick it, and now it's going to move and reschedule with the rest of its siblings. So I can drill down to the point where I'm seeing pages in the course, right? That's what's indicated by this kind of black page icon. And so it's laying out then those pages according to the days that I've specified are available to it. And so you can see the default schedule, and this is what gives its the term a soft schedule, is that it is suggesting to the students that they should read this particular page by this particular date. You have other choices where you can actually, well, it's actually cutting off the drop down. I can say that this is actually something we're going to talk about in class, right? So it's gives perhaps a different level of importance for that student to see when they, because all of this will feed into a student-oriented view, where when they log into their course section, they're going to see essentially a calendar of what's up next for them. So if they see in 2 days, we're going to talk about this, the topics in this page on this day in class, that may motivate them to read that page before that class. The final option is due by. And so that's actually where this now bridges back into the existing feature of what we call a hard schedule. So I can actually say this page, I'm not just suggesting you do it by this certain date, you have to do it by this certain date and now a time. If you don't work on that page and submit an attempt, you will not be able to access it after that time. So that actually unifies kind of our previous scheduling interface and feature into this single user interface for laying out the soft schedule for all of the material in your course, but also then having the ability to specify, probably right, for your graded pages in the course, when there is a hard schedule that's defined, right? When the student has to submit an attempt by, because after that date and time, they won't be able to access and submit additional attempts. So that's I think kind of the gist of it. And it took us right up to 1:30.
I was gonna say, it took us right to time. Thanks, Darren, so much for showing that.
Yeah, super cool. And I think anybody that has tried to, who not tried, but has suffered through the legacy scheduling environment, there's a lot here that should make life easier. Super excited about it.
Thanks, Sebastian. Well, that brings us to time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you want to have more of a look of the soft scheduling feature, just reach out and ask me. I'm happy to give a demo on this or anything else as you need it. And definitely happy that you all joined us, and and look for joining us again next month.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.